Imagine spending $100 million on a flawless, just totally state-of-the-art robotic warehouse.
Oh, wow. That is a lot of money.
Right. I mean, every single line of code is perfect. Every optical sensor works exactly the way it's designed to. The deployment hits the launch date on the dot, and, the finance team is thrilled because it came in exactly on budget.
Sounds like a project manager's dream, honestly.
It does. Until day one. Because on day one, it completely destroys your company's operational capacity. We are looking at a catastrophe so profound that it, crippled a logistics empire, caused global shipping delays, and bled cash at a rate that had the board of directors actually contemplating bankruptcy.
Yeah, that is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any enterprise executing a massive transformation.
Truly.
Because you achieve technical perfection, right?
Yeah.
But you deliver a catastrophic business failure. You basically build the wrong thing, but you build it flawlessly.
Exactly. And welcome to today's deep dive, where we are getting into the anatomy of that exact nightmare. We're going to dissect this fictional but, highly realistic case of NovaStream.
Yeah, a great example.
They're this massive global logistics player, and this $100 million blunder, which they called Project Phoenix, is going to be our focal point for today.
I love diving into Project Phoenix because it's just so revealing.
It really is. We are going to look at why projects of this sheer scale implode. And more importantly for you listening, we're going to explore this really rigorous but often misunderstood discipline that acts as an organization's ultimate insurance policy against this kind of disaster.
Right, which is business analysis.
Exactly, business analysis.
And, it is a discipline that is so frequently reduced to simply taking meeting notes or just writing down technical requirements for developers, like a scribe.
Yeah, just taking down orders.
Right. But in reality, business analysis is the architectural bridge between a company's high-level strategy and its ground-level execution. I mean, by definition, it is the practice of enabling change in an enterprise by defining actual needs and recommending solutions that deliver tangible value.
Which brings us right back to the smoking crater that was Project Phoenix.
Let's get into it.
So, to set the stage for you, NovaStream's executives were feeling the heat, competitors were modernizing, so they approved this massive capital expenditure to retrofit their primary North American distribution hub out in Ohio, I think, with a fully automated AI-driven sorting system.
Yep. Going all in on tech.
Right. They hired a top-tier project management firm, they brought in bleeding-edge robotics vendors, and they executed the build phase with just military precision.
And we have to give credit where it's due. From a purely project management perspective, Project Phoenix was a triumph.
It really was.
The PMs managed the triple constraint, time, cost, and scope, just brilliantly. The hardware arrived on schedule. The integration testing showed like a 99.9% uptime for the sorting arms. They were literally checking every single box on their Gantt charts.
But then November hits.
Yes.
Peak holiday shipping season, NovaStream's most profitable, most critical window of the entire year. The system goes live, and the warehouse just grinds to a complete agonizing halt.
And it's not because the robots broke down, right?
No. Not at all. It's because these brilliant robotic claws, which were optimized for standard uniform cardboard boxes, suddenly encountered NovaStream's seasonal reality.
Right, the holiday freight.
Exactly. The holiday freight profile was wildly different. I mean, they were receiving shipments of bicycles, oversized teddy bears, oddly shaped golf club boxes, and those flexible poly mailers that just slide everywhere.
Yeah, those are a nightmare for robots.
Totally. The optical sensors couldn't recognize the dimensions, and the pneumatic grips couldn't hold the irregular weights.
So they essentially built a perfect machine for a reality that didn't exist in November.
Exactly. So the floor managers had to hit the emergency stop. They literally had to manually bypass this $100 million automated system, reverting to hand sorting.
Wow.
But doing it in a warehouse that had just been physically redesigned to remove all the manual sorting lanes.
Oh, that is brutal.
Yeah.
And, the fallout from that kind of thing is immediate. We talk about the cost of late discovery in this field, and it is one of the most brutal metrics in enterprise architecture.
Tell me about it.
When a critical business need, like, say, the ability to process non-standard freight during your highest volume season, is discovered after the system is bolted to the concrete floor, the financial impact doesn't just double, it grows exponentially.
Yeah, it's the classic Bohm's curve, right?
Exactly. Finding a defect or a missed requirement in the planning phase costs you, a few hours of whiteboard time?
Right, maybe a few meetings.
Finding it in development costs you maybe a few weeks of coding, but finding it in production during peak operations, that costs you tens of millions in sunk costs, lost revenue, and just massive reputational damage.
Yeah, and that late discovery is really the direct result of a vacuum in business analysis. Because the project manager's mandate is to ensure the organization is doing things right.
Doing things right, yes.
They ensure the steel is fabricated correctly, the software compiles, but they are not traditionally responsible for ensuring the organization is doing the right things.
That distinction is so important.
It's like, imagine building a luxury mansion without consulting the people who will actually live there.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
You might get this beautiful house, the project manager delivers it on time, under budget, but then the family moves in and realizes there's no plumbing in the bathrooms.
Yeah, beautifully constructed, totally useless.
Exactly. So the project manager delivers the project. The business analyst ensures the project was actually worth delivering.
And if you're listening and you manage a massive IT portfolio right now, you have probably seen this tension firsthand.
Oh, definitely.
You launch an enterprise CRM, It works perfectly, but the sales team completely refuses to adopt it because it, I don't know, adds 15 clicks to their daily workflow.
Right. And to prevent that, the business analysis profession relies on a foundational framework. It's basically the lens through which every enterprise initiative must be viewed to ensure it's actually viable.
And that's the business analysis core concept model.
Or the BACCM.
Right, the BACCM.
And rather than just, reading off a list of concepts, we are going to use the BACCM to forensically dismantle Project Phoenix today.
Let's do it.
We're going to look at the 6 interconnected elements of this framework and show how applying them rigorously would have saved NovaStream from themselves.
And it's important to note that the BACCM is inherently dynamic. You can't isolate one piece without affecting all the others. But every initiative, every project, every transformation, it always begins with a catalyst.
The spark.
Yeah, the spark. It begins with a perceived gap in capability.
Right, the catalyst. Let's look at that. So the executives at NovaStream, they sit in a boardroom, they look at a slide deck showing a dip in market share, and they declare, we need automated robots.
Classic.
That was the genesis of Project Phoenix. But if you analyze that statement, it falls apart almost immediately.
Because we need automated robots is not a business need.
Wait, it's not.
No, not at all. It is a presumed solution masquerading as a need. And honestly, this is perhaps the most common trap in corporate strategy.
That makes a lot of sense.
Stakeholders jump straight to the end state based on, what they've seen competitors do or what some vendor has aggressively sold them, without actually defining the underlying problem.
It is essentially self-diagnosing before you see the doctor.
Yes, exactly.
You walk in and say, I need a prescription for antibiotics, rather than saying, I have a sharp pain in my chest when I breathe.
And a seasoned business analyst acts as that diagnostician. When an executive says, we need robots, the analyst employs root cause analysis techniques. They might use the 5 whys methodology to peel back the layers of that demand.
Oh, I love the 5 whys. Let's actually play that out for NovaStream.
Okay, let's do it.
So the executive says, we need robots. The analyst asks, why do we need robots?
And the executive responds, because our warehouse operations are too slow.
Okay, so the analyst asks, why are our operations too slow?
The executive says, because we can't sort packages fast enough to meet the outbound truck schedules.
Why can't we sort packages fast enough?
Because during November and December, our package volume spikes by like 300%, and our manual sorting lines reach maximum physical capacity.
And there it is.
There it is.
The actual business need has literally nothing to do with robotics. The true need is simply, we need the capability to process a 300% surge in package volume during peak season without missing our outbound shipping service level agreements.
And uncovering that true need changes the entire trajectory of the enterprise.
It really does.
Because needs are the ultimate motivators for change. They represent a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be seized. If you define the need incorrectly, every subsequent dollar you spend and every hour of labor you invest is directed at the wrong target.
So true. And that transition from the current state, where they're failing to meet peak demand, to the future state where they can actually handle the volume, that requires an active transformation.
Right. It requires a deliberate, controlled change.
Change.
That is the next facet of the framework. Change works to improve the performance of an enterprise. But uncontrolled change, change that is unmoored from a validated business need, that is just organizational chaos.
Which is exactly what NovaStream did. They initiated a massive change. I mean, they physically gutted a working warehouse.
Ripped it down to the studs.
Yeah. They introduced miles of new electrical conduit, complex software integrations, and completely upended their standard operating procedures. But because they were executing a change based on the presumed need for robots, rather than the true need of handling volume spikes, the change was just fundamentally flawed from its inception.
Furthermore, they failed to account for the systemic nature of change in an enterprise architecture.
What do you mean by that?
Well, a change doesn't happen in a vacuum. When you alter one node in a complex system, it sends ripple effects throughout the entire organization. And this is where gap analysis becomes so critical.
Let's dig into that for a second, because I always wonder, can a change actually create a new need? Like it just cascades?
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
cascades constantly. The introduction of Project Phoenix eroded the value of their existing workforce capability.
Oh, right.
Suddenly, the shift supervisors, who were, experts in managing manual labor, had a new critical need. They needed to be retrained on how to troubleshoot pneumatic sensor failures.
Wow, yeah. That's a totally different skill set.
Completely different. And the IT department, which previously just managed the warehouse Wi-Fi for some handheld barcode scanners, suddenly they have a new need. They need industrial-grade, low-latency network infrastructure to handle constant telemetry data from hundreds of robots.
So if the business analyst isn't actively mapping those ripple effects, the enterprise just drowns in these secondary needs. You
Yeah,
solve one presumed problem and create a dozen real ones.
exactly. And this is why the discipline of requirements lifecycle management is so rigorous. As the change progresses, the analyst is constantly tracing these new requirements back to the original business need.
Keeping everyone honest.
Right. If a new requirement doesn't support the overarching goal of handling peak volume, it is challenged or just discarded.
Okay, so let's say a proficient business analyst has stepped in at NovaStream. They've walked the executives back from the ledge of, we need robots, and defined the true need, managing the Q4 volume surge.
A huge win right there.
Huge. And they've mapped out the scope of the change required to get there. Now, the organization actually has to build something to bridge that gap.
Right, which moves us into the realm of designing the solution.
Yeah.
And it's vital to recognize that a solution is a specific way of satisfying one or more needs in a context. It is never the only way.
That distinction is everything. The robots were a solution. They just happened to be a disastrously expensive solution for the actual problem at hand.
Exactly. When a business analyst evaluates solutions, they're performing a really complex trade-off analysis. They're looking at technical feasibility, financial constraints, and organizational readiness.
Okay.
If the true need is simply to increase processing speed by 20% during a 2-month window, the analyst is going to propose multiple design options.
Let's brainstorm those. Like option A is Project Phoenix, right? The $100 million automated overhaul, high risk, massive capital expenditure, long lead time.
Yep. Option B might be more of a process optimization solution.
Okay, what does that look like?
Perhaps they redesign the physical layout of the legacy warehouse to reduce the walking distance for manual pickers by, say, 15%. They upgrade their routing software to batch orders more efficiently, and maybe they just lease a temporary overflow facility for November and December.
Well, that's smart. And option C could be purely human capital. What if they just dramatically increase the hourly wage for seasonal workers just to ensure they had a massive, highly motivated temporary workforce for those 8 weeks?
An analyst would model the return on investment for all three of those. Option B or C might cost a fraction of the robotic system.
A tiny fraction.
Right. And they might carry significantly less implementation risk. And most importantly, they would inherently be able to handle the weirdly shaped seasonal freight, because human hands and temporary sorting tables are infinitely more adaptable than a rigid robotic claw.
Yeah, humans can pick up a giant teddy bear without crushing it or dropping it.
Precisely. But assessing those solutions requires an understanding of the environment they're going to live in. Which brings us to the operational reality, or the context.
Context, yeah. Context is the circumstances that are influenced by and provide understanding of the change. Basically, it encompasses the internal and external environment. It's basically like buying a multi-million-dollar Formula One car, right?
Okay, I'm tracking.
As a solution for going fast, it is unparalleled. It is the pinnacle of engineering.
Sure.
But if your context is that you live in a cabin at the top of a snowy mountain with dirt roads, the F1 car is completely useless. The solution is flawless. The context makes it a failure. You actually need a 4x4 truck, even if it's way slower on paper.
That is a perfect illustration. NovaStream ignored their context entirely. They performed a massive capability drop into an environment that just couldn't support it.
Yeah, let's look at their physical infrastructure context.
Okay, they installed highly calibrated robotics into a warehouse built in the 1970s. The concrete floors were uneven.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The robots, which required millimeter precision to navigate the aisles, constantly threw error codes because the floor grade was off by like 2 degrees.
That is wild. A 2-degree slant breaks a $100 million system.
It does. And what about the cultural context? You are dropping an automated system into a facility manned by workers who have spent the last 5 years reading headlines about AI taking their jobs.
Right, the human element. The organizational culture is a massive contextual constraint. NovaStream's workforce viewed Project Phoenix not as a tool to help them, but as a direct threat to their livelihoods.
Understandably so.
Yeah. Consequently, when the robots experienced minor mechanical hiccups during the rollout, the floor staff didn't report them to the engineering team. They ignored them. They actively allowed the system to fail because they had zero cultural buy-in.
Which is sabotage by omission. But if a business analyst had mapped the cultural context, they would have identified that lack of trust as a critical risk on day one.
They would have seen it coming.
Yes. They would have implemented a comprehensive change management strategy, perhaps involving the floor workers in the actual design phase or guaranteeing job security, just to mitigate that hostility.
Okay, but playing devil's advocate here, exploring context can quickly become overwhelming, right? I mean, how much of the context does a business analyst actually have to map out? Isn't everything in the environment just too broad? An analyst could theoretically spend years analyzing macroeconomic trends, local labor laws, weather patterns, and the corporate politics of an enterprise.
You're right, they could. You can't map the entire universe just for a warehouse upgrade. The guiding principle here is just enough detail.
Just enough detail.
Yeah. A skilled business analyst doesn't map the environment for the sake of documentation. They analyze the context specifically to uncover constraints, assumptions, and dependencies that will actively impact the solution's viability.
Okay, so they map the uneven floor because it's a literal physical constraint on the robots.
Right.
They map the workforce anxiety because it's a constraint on adoption. But they don't map, I don't know, the color of the paint in the break room because it has no bearing on the change strategy.
Exactly. It is highly targeted environmental scanning. They use frameworks like PESTLE, examining political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. But they filter the findings relentlessly against the core business need.
This highlights a really crucial intersection. You have to understand the context to design the solution, but who actually defines the constraints within that context? Like, who tells you that the floor is uneven or that the seasonal freight is shaped like a bicycle?
Right. And this brings us to the human element of the architecture. The stakeholders.
Stakeholder.
A stakeholder is any group or individual with a relationship to the change, the need, or the solution.
And this is where the corporate hierarchy often totally blindsides an initiative. At NovaStream, the executives initiated the project. They held the budget. They signed the vendor contracts. So in their minds, they were the only stakeholders that mattered.
Yes. And in business analysis taxonomy, those executives are the sponsors. They're critical, yes. They authorize the work and they control the funding.
Obviously very important people.
Very important. But a fatal flaw in enterprise change is conflating the sponsor with the end user or the domain subject matter expert.
Because executives don't sort the boxes.
They don't. And therefore, they do not possess the granular operational requirements necessary to build a functional system. The business analyst has to perform comprehensive stakeholder mapping to identify everyone who has an interest in, an impact on, or influence over the change.
Let's look at a standard power interest grid for a project like this. You have the sponsors, high power, high interest. But who did NovaStream ignore?
They ignored the floor managers and the manual sorting staff. These are the end users.
Right.
In a hierarchical organization, they might have low institutional power, but they have extremely high interest and impact regarding this specific solution. They are literally the only ones who truly understand the physical realities of the seasonal freight profile.
And by failing to elicit requirements from the end users, NovaStream built a system for a sterilized theoretical warehouse rather than their actual messy reality.
Yeah, they also missed critical operational support stakeholders. Like, did they talk to the facilities maintenance crew?
Probably not.
Those are the people who will have to repair the robots at 2:00 a.m. on a Sunday. If the vendor doesn't provide them with the right diagnostic software, the entire warehouse stays down until Monday morning.
Wow, yeah. What about external stakeholders?
A classic omission. They failed to consult the regulators. A robotic sorting arm moves at high velocity and carries significant kinetic energy. Did they consult the Occupational Safety and Health Administration guidelines? Did they involve their internal safety compliance officers?
If they didn't, they might build the entire system only to have a safety inspector red tag the whole warehouse because the turning radius of the autonomous vehicles doesn't leave enough clearance for human pedestrian walkways.
Exactly. And eliciting requirements from a diverse stakeholder group is not just about gathering a wish list. It is a rigorous process of negotiation and conflict resolution, because stakeholders will invariably have conflicting needs.
Let's dive into that friction because it's so real. What happens when the CFO, who is a powerful sponsor, mandates that the project must cut operational expenses by 20%? But the floor manager, the end user, mandates that the new system must retain the current staffing levels to handle edge case exceptions. Those needs are fundamentally at odds.
They are. And this is where the business analyst truly earns their keep. They don't just act as a passive scribe, writing down both conflicting demands and handing it to developers.
Right. Good luck with that.
Yeah, they actively facilitate a resolution. They analyze the trade-offs. They might demonstrate to the CFO that retaining a small, highly trained exception-handling team actually prevents costly shipping bottlenecks, thereby protecting overall revenue, even if it slightly misses the initial operational expense reduction target.
So the BA is essentially acting as a corporate diplomat, forcing stakeholders to align their individual demands with the overarching enterprise strategy.
Yes, because ultimately the goal of navigating the needs, the change, the solutions, the context, and the stakeholders is to deliver the final component of the BACCM framework.
Value.
Value.
Value is the worth, importance, or usefulness of something to a stakeholder within a context. It's the ultimate metric of success, really.
It is.
But in the corporate world, value is almost exclusively equated with a financial return on investment. Like, if a project costs $10 million and generates $15 million in new revenue, it delivered $5 million in value. Simple math.
And that tangible monetary calculation is certainly a primary component of value. But the business analysis framework demands a much broader understanding. Value can be tangible, increase market share, reduce material waste, faster processing times. But it is equally often intangible.
And intangible value is harder to put on a spreadsheet.
It is, but it is often what dictates the long-term survival of an enterprise. Intangible value encompasses employee morale, brand reputation, corporate culture, customer trust, regulatory compliance.
Let's apply that to the NovaStream disaster. When Project Phoenix collapsed during peak season, we know the tangible negative value. They wasted $100 million on capital expenditure, and they incurred massive, immediate financial penalties for breaching service-level agreements with their major shipping partners.
Brutal.
But the intangible negative value was arguably more destructive. By deploying a system that made the floor workers' jobs impossible, and by totally ignoring their warnings, NovaStream decimated employee morale.
Yeah, and that leads to high turnover, which just increases future hiring and trading costs.
And think about the end customer, the person waiting for a holiday gift that never arrived. The intangible loss of customer trust means those customers will actively choose a competitor next year. That reputational damage creates a long-tail revenue bleed that might actually dwarf the initial $100 million loss.
This brings up a really critical nuance in how business analysts assess value. Value is rarely uniform across an organization.
What do you mean?
Well, a single solution can deliver immense positive value to one stakeholder group while simultaneously inflicting massive negative value on another.
So wait, is it possible for a project to deliver immense value to one stakeholder but completely destroy value for another? Give me a scenario where that happens.
Absolutely. Imagine a hospital implementing a new, highly secure electronic health record system.
Okay.
For the IT, security, and compliance stakeholders, this system delivers incredible value. It locks down patient data, ensures strict regulatory adherence, and mitigates the risk of massive fines. It's a huge win for them.
But for the ER doctors and nurses?
Exactly. For the clinical staff on the floor, the end users, the new system requires dual-factor authentication and 10 extra clicks to prescribe a basic medication. In a trauma situation, those extra seconds are excruciating. For them, this system delivers negative value. It decreases their efficiency and severely increases their cognitive load.
So how does an organization reconcile that? If value is subjective and relative, who wins?
The enterprise wins. The business analyst's responsibility is to assess the potential value of all design options from the perspective of all stakeholders. But ultimately, they must recommend the solution that brings the most aggregate positive value to the enterprise as a whole.
So it's a constant balancing act. You are weighing the tangible risk of regulatory fines against the intangible risk of physician burnout.
Yeah, you manage the trade-offs. The analyst might work with the security team to implement, say, proximity badge readers for the doctors, maintaining the high security standard but removing the friction of manual logins. They negotiate the requirements to maximize the net enterprise value.
That holistic view completely reframes how we look at project success. Under a traditional rigid execution model, if the software is delivered on time, the project is a success, regardless of whether the doctors actually use it.
Right, but the BACCM framework dismantles that illusion. You cannot claim success simply because a change was executed. If the solution does not address the true need, if it ignores the operating context, if it alienates the key stakeholders, and if it fails to deliver net positive value, it is a failure.
Project Phoenix was a flawless execution of a profound failure. They built a mansion with imported Italian marble and a 10-car garage, but they forgot to ask the family if they needed plumbing, and they built it on a sinkhole.
That's it, exactly. The rigor of business analysis, tracing every requirement back to a root cause, analyzing the environment, mapping the human impact, and relentlessly focusing on enterprise value. That is the only way to ensure that an organization builds the right thing in the right way for the right reasons.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a provocative thought about the future of this discipline. We are currently watching the explosion of generative AI and low-code, no-code platforms. We are entering an era where the technical barrier to building a solution is dropping to zero. You can ask an AI to write a complex software application, and it can deploy it in hours.
Yeah, the velocity of technical execution is becoming near instantaneous.
Right. And if the speed of building things becomes infinite, doesn't the risk of initiating uncontrolled changes just skyrocket? If you can build a solution instantly, without feeling the pain of a massive capital budget or a 2-year timeline, the temptation to just throw AI-generated solutions at every perceived problem will be overwhelming.
It's the ultimate amplification of the NovaStream trap. When execution is cheap and fast, organizations will drown in presumed solutions. They will deploy massive technological changes without ever pausing to define the underlying business need.
Which means that as AI commoditizes the building of solutions, the human practice of business analysis, the ability to navigate messy corporate politics, to elicit hidden needs from anxious stakeholders, to define the complex context of an enterprise, and to determine what is actually valuable, that practice doesn't become obsolete. It becomes the single most critical capability in the modern corporate world.
I completely agree. The technology will continue to accelerate. The tools will change. But the fundamental requirement to understand why an enterprise needs to change and how to ensure that change delivers meaningful value remains a profoundly human endeavor.
You can have the fastest robots or the smartest AI in the world, but if you haven't done the analysis, you're just accelerating your path to a $100 million mistake. Take the 6 concepts of the BACCM. Look closely at your next big initiative, question the presumed needs, map your stakeholders, and make sure you aren't laying the groundwork for your own Project Phoenix. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.